Giant Stalker, Dragon Stalker, Crypt Stalker, Demon Stalker, Rift Stalker, Grown Stalker, Crypt Stalker, Scourge Stalker, Wind Runner, I'm a pony, Elite Skilled Hunter. A Death Dealer, a Life Stealer, that's just because.
Welcome to episode 151 of the Hunting Tiller Podcast. I'm not Euripides from WoW Insider, Out DPS, or Call to Auction, although they did do one this morning.
And I'm Dark Brew from thebrewhall.com and the Brew Hall on Twitter.
And this is Frostheim from Warcraft Hunters Union, WoW Insider, and Frostheim WHU on Twitter.
And I'm Am Alexander from the Hunting Party Podcast.
Today is Saturday, November the 17th, 2012, and if you want to participate in the chat room and aren't registered, well, or even if you are registered today, just go ahead and type OPA in the chat room and you'll be prompted to register, because joining us today is Roger Brown from Greece.
Woohoo!
Nice welcome.
And speaking of the live chat room, we are joined today in the live chat room by Akdus, Akal22, I Liger Wolf, Beep Beep Boop Boop Bop, great name there, BM Jager, Conjure, Dom Splitter, Drawfist, Dukai Maj, Foxtrap 05, Gobo, Gorbrax, Havtor, Hotshot Gun, Hunter Extraordinaire, Nekri, Primock, Rhino Banya, Ryuner, Slugslinger, Synth Paradox, Tag Yorit 1, Warvinny, Rek, and, as always, your lovely moderator, Ollie Sonder. If you have any questions for us or questions for Roger Brown of Method, please send them in a private message to Ollie Sonder, and she'll determine what order the questions are asked in, and in fact, whether they get asked or not, based on your answer to this question. Euripides is late this month. And we want to know, do you think it's going to be a boy or a girl?
Or a druid.
Or druid. That's right. What class? What class? If Euripides is in fact late because he's knocked up, what class got him knocked up? That might be an even better question.
And on to the news.
Well, Roger Brown, welcome back to the Hunting Party Podcast. Thanks for coming and joining us with Patch 5.1 on the horizon.
Yes, hello. Thanks for having me back on the show. It's nice to be back.
All right, and so for those of you who are unfamiliar with Roger Brown, he is a hunter from the Progression Rating Guild Method, which is currently ranked the number one 25-man guild in the world. They have a bunch of world first kills in 25, including Will of the Emperor. And I guess you guys are going to be going after Terrace of the Endless Spring Heroic this week?
Yes, on Wednesday when it gets unlocked.
Oh, that's right, because you're over, you play in the EU, so you're on a European server. So you guys actually get that a day later than the US realms, is that correct?
Yes, it's not exactly a day. It's like 14, 15 hours. So it's half a day.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense, though, right? Because Blizzard's got to do something to help the North Americans out to give us some chance. Some chance.
Apparently, it's not helping very much, though.
No, I think we need to expand that. We need a larger handicap here in the U.S. is what we need.
To be honest, though, I mean, it's not always like that. I mean, I have to be honest here. Like the U.S. guilds this time. I don't know if you know, but the first boss, for example, on Heart of the Fear was quite hard at the start. So their advantage, let's say, evaporated because of that. So don't give them a hard time. I don't think they deserve that.
So sometimes by the time it opens up for you, some bugs have been corrected?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, apparently with that first boss, they was way overtuned, right? I mean, it was almost impossibly hard to defeat, much harder than it should be for a opening boss, let's say.
Definitely, yes.
And I think some of the guilds just bypassed that one, right? You just did it on normal and then went on to the other bosses to try and progress. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, so a few guilds did that.
So let's see. Before we get into specific questions for Roger Brown, let's quick hit up the news for this week, which I guess our top news item is that the Darkmoon Fair trinkets are not going to be nerfed.
Yeah. I mean, apparently there was a post to MMOC, and it was just some data mined information that showed a reduction in the stats and the proc, and the Blues chimed in and said this was a bug fix for the challenge modes. Apparently the trinkets, if you wore one in the challenge mode, was not getting properly reduced to I guess what a 463 item level, so it was doing its full damage and full stats and everything. And that's not what they had intended.
And fair enough there. And we had a bunch more tweets from Ghostcrawler. The first of which I think is the most interesting and the most hopeful, where somebody asked if there was any plans to buff Hunter DPS for PvE. And Ghostcrawler replied, maybe a small buff, and said Hunters are usually near the top, but there probably aren't many fights where they are on the top. So I mean that's the first hope we've seen of maybe getting some kind of Hunter buff. And keep in mind we are getting the Steady Cobra on the move ability in 5.1, which could be interpreted as a little buff.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like maybe we'll actually get an actual buff in addition to that.
And is that your impression too of what Ghostcrawler said there, Roger, as far as Hunters usually being near the top but not at the top? Or
I would say that there are a few fights where we're actually at the bottom even, depending on, of course, what you're doing in the fight. But yes, it's really hard as a Hunter to be on the top because you can do good DPS on certain fights, but there's always a class that does better than you. So yeah, I would agree on that.
Which, ideally in a perfect world, right, if they had all of the classes and even all of the specs perfectly balanced, we'd be in a position where no classes ever did more DPS than us.
Yes, that would be acceptable.
So somebody else had a question specifically about Marksman, where he said, I know you're not ignoring Marksman, but do you really think the minor changes in 5.1 will be enough to make them viable? And Ghostcrawler's response was that, hey, we increased the duration of steady focus, which is both the quality of life and DPS increase. And I'm sure the person who was asking the question, that was the minor increase that he was talking about, was the giant increase in steady focus duration. But yeah, apparently he thought that was almost nothing, and Ghostcrawler is thinking, it's probably enough.
yeah, and are you? For 5.1, Roger, do you think that's a pretty good increase? Do you see any maybe Marksman becoming a spec people are going to be willing to take a look at and try out? Do you think or is it just going to be languishing pretty far behind in third place where it is now come 5.1?
I definitely think I'm excited actually for 5.1. I really want to try marksmanship out, especially with the movement and the glyph that they're adding that you can do actually aim shots while moving. Mm-hmm. It will make it much easier. And yeah, those small changes that you said are quality of life, which I think Marksman needed. So I'm really excited to play it. I think it's going to be good. I think with the Link's Rush nerf, the BM opener is going to drop, but marksmanship might take that spot of the huge burst in the opener.
Actually, this is probably a good thing to address. So, as we talked about before, they changed Link's Rush primarily for PvP reasons. And so that instead of, bouncing around and doing all these attacks, it did a bleed. So the damage would be spread out over time because they were trying to reduce burst. And then a little while after they did that, they reduced the damage of Link's Rush by like 29%. And everybody was like, oh my god, now they're nerfing our DPS. And that 29% damage reduction is not a nerf. It's because the bleed effect ignores armor, whereas Link's Rush previously was reduced by armor. So theoretically, and Zahara says that it looks like Link's Rush does in fact contribute the same amount of DPS to BM as it did before. So for raiders, on like your single target boss fights, Link's Rush change isn't affecting your overall DPS. Yeah, but it's just less bursty.
Yes, the only real issue I see with this change is at the opener, where you're hitting those 300, 350k DPS. You won't be able to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Because your cooldowns will be down by the time the second Link's Rush is midway, so it won't really get the full benefit of your potion, of your trinket procs, and all of that.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. So, with the BM opener, what exactly are you doing for your opener, and what duration are we talking about? You're talking like just like your potion duration, or walk us through what you do to start a typical fight as BM to get such huge burst.
Okay, so pretty much like BM opener is really hard to master. Like everyone's doing his own thing, I think, right now. So there's no cookie cutter opener. But what I do personally is I start with the Serpent Sting, because the Serpent Sting actually, the ticks are dynamically changing depending on your buffs. So if you do it at the start and then your trinket procs, it actually gets benefit from that. So it's good to use it at the start.
And with the trinket, you're primarily referring to whatever trinket you have, or is this mostly for the Dark Moon card trinket? Is that what you're using?
For all the trinkets.
Okay.
For all the
I mean,
trinkets.
all the best trinkets are proc based, so you know those are going to proc in the first 10 seconds sometimes. So basically, what you're saying is you lead off with Serpent Sting because any other ability you lead off with, you know, isn't going to have any of those procs.
Yes, exactly. It's, let's say, looking for the future, it will do the most DPS. It's the best time to use it compared to any other ability. So yeah, I start with that, then I do a kill command, and then I wait with my Bestial Wrath for the second kill command. So within those 5 seconds, 5 globals in between, you can pop your Glaive Toss to proc your trinkets again, because I don't know if you have the Darkmoon trinket, but that trinket is really bad when you're checking its proc rate, because it only procs from basically Glaive Toss and Arcane Shots at the opener, since you're not doing any Cobra Shots. That's the only 2 things. So you want to use Glaive Toss, you want to use Stampede there, Dire Beast, and then a couple of Arcane Shots, and then go Bestial Wrath, use your Link's Rush, and then on the second kill command on that Bestial Wrath, you Readiness, kill command again. Anyways, afterwards it's pretty straightforward. It's mostly about the opener getting your trinkets up before your Bestial Wrath.
So I take it you're popping your rapid fire in that first 6 seconds too?
Yes, I pop it after my first kill command. Pretty much, yeah, when I'm doing around on the 5th global, yes. Around the 5th global from the opener, I use rapid fire before my Bestial Wrath.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So then you rapid fire, Bestial Wrath, and at that point, I guess all you've got up is Arcane Shots. Then you hit your kill command, Readiness kill command, and now you've got everything back.
Yeah. And it's really important to be able to catch your Link's Rush, both of them, with your trinket procs. Because the second one, if you don't do it fast enough, your trinkets are over already, and you're losing a lot of buff.
Okay. And also with your kill command Readiness combination, you're getting 3 kill commands under 1 Bestial Wrath, correct? That's your goal there.
Yes, and remember that Readiness actually removes global cooldown as well. So you can basically do 2 kill commands within whatever latency you have. It's like 0.2 seconds.
So you can effectively do a macro that, say, pops Readiness and kill command together.
Yes, that's what I have, actually.
That's awesome. So just to recap for our listeners who I'm sure are paying close attention, we're talking about Serpent Sting, Kill Command,
and then
Glaive Toss, Stampede, or Stampede, Glaive Toss?
Dire Beast, Stampede, Glaive Toss, actually. Dire Beast, Stampede, Glaive Toss.
So it's
and
Dire
that
Beast.
depends on whether you have the Darkmoon trinket, right?
The Darkmoon trinket will not proc unless from autoshots, yeah, but doesn't really usually happen. It will usually proc from the Glaive Toss or the 2 Arcane Shots before the Bestial Wrath. That's usually when it should proc.
Okay, so it's Serpent Sting, Kill Command,
Dire Beast,
Stampede, Glaive Toss.
Then Rapid Fire plus 2 Arcane Shots, and then Bestial Wrath together with Kill Command. And if the trinkets are up, like depending when the trinkets are up, you use your Link's Rush. And then on the second kill command on that Beast Within, you Readiness Beast Within again. Kill command again.
Right. Yeah. And I take it you're pre-potting too. So are you popping a Vermin's Bite before the pull? So does all of this end up falling underneath the full duration of the potion?
So like the second Bestial Wrath should be ending like 1 second after your potion ends. So it's pretty much perfect.
And so during that little period, you're saying you're doing in the neighborhood of 300 to 350,000 DPS?
With heroism, yes, pretty much.
That is awesome.
And that, my friends, is why they had to nerf hunters in PvP.
Yeah, as I say, you can imagine that short 20 to 25 seconds in PvP, what a wrecking ball you really become. But for PvE, I mean, with these raid encounters, I mean, eventually it once you complete that opener, you really starts to taper off after that, and you just watch it go down and down.
Actually, and let's talk about that. How are you seeing? We touched on this briefly a little bit before. How are you seeing Hunter DPS doing overall in rating? What's the view from the top?
So basically, I've thought about it, and pretty much the only fights where hunters are good are the ones where it's single target DPS and there's a lot of movement. A couple of examples are Blade Lord, for example. I'm sure most of you have done that, where there's a lot of movement throughout the whole fight. Also in Heroic, you even get like pulled towards the boss. I don't know if you've seen that ability. So there's a lot of movement, which basically you're doing good DPS, not because of the class, but because the other casters get more. They lose more DPS by movement than you do. So
now, this is interesting. This is before they made the change to Aspect of the Fox. They've always said, and I quote, "Movement should be terrible for ranged." We lose, assuming we know what we're doing, we lose far less than other ranged DPS when we have to move. I suspect that's because of things like Cobra Shot, Aspect of the Fox, but also because of things like Disengage.
Yes, exactly. For example, I'll tell you a small thing. On Blade Lord, as I told you, he pulls you towards the boss and then starts, like the new mechanic they've introduced in Mist of Pandaria, where there's like air that pushes you and you're like fighting against it.
Yes.
So it's doing that afterwards. So what I was listening to is some casters saying, "Oh, you need to be close to the boss because then the animation of pulling you in is shorter, so you can run away fast enough to not get hit by it." And I'm like, "What are these guys talking about? I'll just disengage instantly and that's fine." So
yeah, Disengage is beautiful. It's an ability that just completely throws away any data that it has about your momentum or your position and just makes it so that you're traveling at the disengage speed backwards, which is why you don't die if you disengage right before you land, if you fall from a great height. And the same thing I suspect is applying here. So Disengage, you're saying, breaks that wind buffet ability?
Yeah, like while he's pulling you in, you can just disengage and you move backwards. It's basically a non-existent mechanic in the fight for you.
Yeah. I remember in Syndragosa a long time ago, Disengage, was it Syndragosa? I forget which boss it was, but one of the bosses that pulled us all in, if you disengaged at the exact moment, you just drop like a stone. You just land right where you were.
Oh, yeah. That happens sometimes. I think it actually happens a lot more lately, especially in PvP. Like if you get stunned midway, something like that. I don't know. It was like a change in Mist of Pandaria. But it doesn't happen on that boss. At least to me, it hasn't happened.
No.
As long as you do it early enough, I think you're fine.
Okay, so you're saying that so hunters are good on single target fights with lots of movement, but you're also saying even on those fights, we're not the best.
Yeah, like we're canning the distance between the classes, where the gap, let's say, but still, I mean, we're doing equal DPS with other classes on those fights, let's say.
Okay.
But then you have the other fights. For example, hunters have no cleaving, basically. So as soon as there is something to multi-dot or to spread your living bombs on, then you're totally falling behind. There's no way you're catching up.
And so how much of this problem is fire mages?
Yeah, it's a problem. I don't know. I think for sure they need to fix that a bit, because they either need to fix that or buff all the other classes, and I don't think that's really viable.
And to be fair, we were talking before the show. Roger Brown has a fire mage, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So under which circumstances would you bring your hunter to a raid rather than your fire mage, or do you just bring them both?
Well, it's a good. Well, currently I'm not playing my mage because it has way less gear than my hunter, obviously. But I will. It's a good example nowadays because with Terrace of the Endless Springs coming up, you should, like from what I've seen at least, you should be bringing hunters there. It's a good instance for hunters because, as I said, it's only single target most of the time. Like all the bosses, pretty much, they don't really have much multi-dotting going on, if any, and there is a lot of movement involved. For example, in Lacey with that push again with the air push thing. So yes, I think for sure hunters are going to be decent on that instance at least. But then some bosses like the last boss in Heart of Fear, when in phase 2 you have like 3 adds here, 3 adds there. That's just, what are you going to do? You can't AoE, you can't single target. It's I don't know what you do there as a hunter, honestly.
And do you do Beast Mastery for all these fights, or do you switch between that and Survival for some fights, especially like the multi-target or things that have AoE? What do you do for those?
Okay, so Survival, I've only played in 3 bosses for heroic progress. What first was Feng, but that boss wasn't really hard, so that's fine. That's the second boss in Mogu'stan Vaults. The second one was the Wheel of the Emperor, because I was DPSing the ads all the time. Wasn't really doing much on the boss, and Survival was better for that. And then the third boss was Windlord in Heart of the Fear, because again there's ads all the time up, so it's better. Those are the only bosses.
What are your professions?
Oh, my professions are just jewel crafting and leatherworking.
Okay.
I'm not doing anything fancy there.
So if hunters have a kind of, I don't know how to say it, excessive weakness on your cleave multi-dot, your fights that aren't really AoE, but there's multiple targets and everybody else kind of butchers us. The fights that Fire Mages and Affliction locks love, basically. But it seems like a lot of classes have a much better toolbox for non-single target fights than hunters do. What would you like to see done to hunters for those kind of fights?
So I was thinking, actually, now that they're removing aspect of the box, I don't actually see any point. Like, they should either, I think, remove aspects totally, like they did, I think, with Paladins, like they don't have auras anymore, because it doesn't really make sense. You're not going to use aspect of the cheetah or of the pack mid-fight at all. So they should either remove them completely, or what I think could be done is maybe have another aspect, don't know, whatever you want to call it, where when you activate it, you're actually, for example, auto-shotting 2 more targets or something, like something like a cleave.
So aspect of the cleave.
Aspect of the cleave, yes, basically. But not make it too strong. I'm not saying that we should be doing as much as the other classes, but at least, like as a BM hunter, when it's 2-3 targets, the only thing you're doing is just single target. You have 0 cleaving abilities. And yeah, so I think maybe if you reduce your damage a bit on the first target and make it so that you cleave, though, that would be a good idea.
And so you do something like maybe just have the auto shot cleave and not all your shots?
Yes, exactly. Something. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, with BM now, you could, on 3 targets, you could multi-shot and then your pedals start cleaving.
Yes, that's true, but
I mean, not significantly.
But that's as a focus dump. It's a focus dump in the sense that it's you use more focus when you're in that situation. Therefore, you use less global suspend your focus than you would on arcane shots. But I think I guess the main thing is that all your other stuff, like your dots aren't ticking. None of your other abilities are multi-target or anything.
Yeah,
I mean, I really like the idea of using the aspect system to solve the cleaving situation, where, because you have a good point. There's aspect of the cheetah. It's nice that we have this speed boost, but and I certainly use it when I'm doing dailies. But outside of that, yeah, you'll never use anything other than Hawk in the raid now, and maybe saying, hey, if you want to preserve the aspect system, here's a way to do it. We sacrifice our extra damage, which in this case would be single target damage, and theoretically most raiders have Iron Hawk anyway, so we're also sacrificing the damage reduction. And in exchange for that, hey, give us a little cleave. Put the cleave on our signature shot, or put the cleave on our auto shot.
Yeah, something. Like there are other ideas as well. You can make survival like a dotting spec, let's say, where you put your dots up and then Cobra Shot, for example, refreshes full duration and not just 6 seconds. So you can just keep track of your dots and just do a couple
Yeah.
of Cobra Shots to keep them up. Yeah,
Well,
Or
and
make
another
multi-shot.
suggestion, another thing a lot of people have brought up was the idea with survival, if you reduce the cost of Black Arrow and removed the cooldown, you could also, you could
Yeah.
multi-shot to Serpent Sting everyone, then you could start applying your Black Arrow to everyone. But then you kind of have a situation, which I don't object to, but a lot of hunters do, of, well, then you have to play this spec for those fights.
Mm.
And I kind of feel like, hey, that's just the way the game is. But a lot of hunters really, I think Blizzard would get better player reaction by trying to come up with a solution that was that applied to every spec.
Yes, I think so too. I mean, it's not bad though if one spec is better than the other on certain fights or certain situations. That's just how it is. You can never have all 3 specs exactly doing the same DPS on everything.
There's
Yeah,
one,
to their
there's actually-
credit, I suspect most of the complaining we hear from people is when their favorite spec doesn't have any fight that it shines on. There'll always be people who play their spec regardless of whether it's optimal, and it's good for them to have at least 1 or 2 fights where they really are optimal. But if this change made it so that certain fights really advantaged survival.
Well,
That
see,
might
I was going to
not,
say, except right now, survival gets a little loving. If you really wanted to do it that way, with the current state of balance, you would give it to marksmen.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's true indeed.
And I also don't think players have gotten used to it yet, but I mean, players have typically not complained too vociferously about one spec, about us having a spec that's not viable in any. I mean, basically until this expansion, BM, since the Patchwork days, had been not viable for anything anywhere except maybe the tendon phase on that
Yogg-Saron?
yeah.
Wait.
Sorry, no, I was going to say
Deathwing.
Deathwing. Yeah, Deathwing's back.
Mhm.
But
They had their moment with Yogg hard modes, too.
yeah, there we go. And they've had a couple of moments, but the point is they were few and far between compared to Marks and Survival, which were always sort of vying for first. I don't think that we would, that a lot of players would be upset if they just focused on making sure that there's at least 2 specs that have fights that are good for them. Because that would sort of be in line with what they've experienced in the past. Of course, I'd love to have specs fights for all 3.
Yeah, and to be honest, I kind of miss marksmanship. It's been ages since I last played it. I think it was Firelands or something. I kind of missed that feeling of aim shots, critting high and feeling all good at the start of the fight. So I actually want to play marksmanship if it's viable soon.
No, and 5.1, all of our sims suggest that marksman isn't that far behind. But it's just, and so I think some of the changes in 5.1 might, they still don't address the fact that marksman is a little bit behind, but they certainly address the fact that, it's just so much more danged hard to play marksman. Once you're able to do steady shot on the move and hard cast aim shot on the move,
Yeah.
definitely be worth checking out again.
Yep, and the steady focus too, where you don't have to constantly pop in those steady shots, even if you don't need
Right.
it. It helps
Right.
a lot too, and that should help with DPS a little bit.
Yeah, and the steady focus move is a huge one. 20 seconds, that's awesome.
I also wanted to say something. It was actually, I think, from Ghostclutter as well. I'm not sure. Maybe you've mentioned it before. I don't know. About them saying, yes, movement might be a bit too good for hunters, so we might be thinking of bringing back sniper training.
Mhm.
I kind of hate that idea, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think
That would suck.
that is really annoying, and it forces you to not do those small movements when you want to do them. I don't know. I usually just, especially when I'm doing instant shots, I just move by reaction. I don't know. It's just a natural feeling, and that really annoys me. And I think on that, because I've thought of that as well, from what I've heard at least, shamans, when they do lightning bolts, they can do them while moving. I'm sure you've seen them. Apparently, they when they do them while moving, they lose some DPS, right? Like they don't get benefit of like some haste, something. I don't know. But I think they could do something like that for our steady shots and cobra shots and whatever. Like make them just do a bit less DPS, so that if you stand still, yeah, you're squeezing out a bit more, but not sniper training, please. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah,
Well,
that was
except that is tied in with something that Ghostcrawler said a while ago, where he was just saying, ranged DPS while moving should be terrible, full stop. And it never has been for us, and now they're making it basically really no
better.
different aside from your skill, right? Your movement DPS should be the same as your standstill DPS, assuming you can execute it. And I also hope that they just leave us alone and this becomes our thing. Like, hey, we're a range class that can DPS on the move.
Yeah.
I really hope so, but I would not be surprised to see sniper
So let me ask you
training
this.
come in.
What if they gave us a sniper training that can be activated once every period of time, either 30 seconds or a minute, and it increased your damage by 50% while it was active? And it had a limited duration, so the maximum uptime per minute would be, low. I don't know, 10 seconds, and you could only you'd have to use it by standing still for an uncomfortably long period of time. But the net would be, if you are capable of working around that limitation, you'd be able to get additional damage.
So you mean what, like having an internal cooldown on it or something?
Yeah, something that wouldn't require us to constantly stand still. Something that
Well, I
would
think
require us to.
You're talking about making it an on-use ability, right?
Nope, I'm talking about anytime you stand still for, let's say, 10 seconds, and
That would be awful.
No, hold on. Think of it this way: if you're able to manipulate and strategize and plan your fight so that you are capable of standing still for some period of time, you then get a bonus that follows you even when you move. That gives you a large portion of damage for a short period of time, or a short portion of damage for a long period of time. And all it does is it forces you to find times during the fight that you can do this. And bearing in mind, it won't force you to constantly stand still as long as there's a cooldown. If there's no cooldown, then yeah, we're always going to be trying to stand still to try and proc it as often as possible. But I get the sense that what people don't like about sniper training was the fact that you were always trying to stand still unless you had a good reason not to.
It sounds a tad complicated to me, particularly because you would pretty much need an add-on or an in-game UI notification of when that internal cooldown, not when it was up, but when it was 10 seconds before it was going to be up. So it's like, oh, it's going to be up in 10 seconds. I better start standing still.
Yeah, see,
Yeah,
I think
maybe that's not the best.
they usually don't want to make hard mechanics. Like, if you saw, they even removed like armor penetration because it was too confusing. Yeah. I don't think they're going to do something so confusing. But I think the idea of standing still and gathering some kind of stacks or buff or I don't know, something. For example, you could say something like, if you stand still for 3 seconds, you get 1 stack of whatever it's gonna be called, and that makes your next Cobra shot or steady shot while moving. You can do it while moving, so that you're basically, let's say, concentrating when you're standing still, and then you can do some casts while moving. Somehow.
Oh yeah, that would make sense.
So that
it's actually not a bad idea.
Yeah.
That's a lot better than my idea. my other, I was about to say something about, well, maybe they could just make it so that auto shots don't hit as often when you're moving. But your way sounds a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of ideas.
Yeah, well, I like that because that then becomes something that you have a little bit of control over. That doesn't address the issue of if they think hunter movement DPS is too high. Because what that does is that nerfs movement DPS for players that aren't you, for players that aren't like top skilled players. But if you're a top skilled player, you still get exactly what we have now, or what was
relative.
5.1.
It's all relative, though. What they could do is they could make it so that if you cast a Cobra shot or a steady shot on the move, then you have, if you're able to stand still for 3 seconds beforehand, you get a buff that makes it do 30% extra damage, or some extra percent of damage. So if if in this new system you continue to play the way you've always played, and you just move around a lot, then you wouldn't be losing anything, but you wouldn't be gaining anything. And if you were able to move effectively, you would be able to gain a small portion of damage. That would sort of solve 2 problems at once. One is that our damage feels a little low, and the second is that we probably don't lose enough when we move.
Yes, I think, what is actually not sad, but it kind of feels weird that Hunter used to be, I don't know if you remember that period of time when you couldn't even cast auto shots while moving. Like, you had to stand still.
Oh,
and
yeah,
cast auto shots.
correct, right.
So
I had
I think-
somebody working on an add-on that counted the number of auto shots that you clipped while moving, just so that people could, get used to it.
That's nice. Like, you suck so much.
Yeah, exactly. To track it week over week,
But I think actually they've gone in a way with hunters that they're really making it so that the skill, like the skill cap of the class is getting lower and lower every time. Like, they removed auto shots from there, now they're removing even casts from there. I don't know if I like that. I don't make this class too easy to play. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
You can't see me, but I'm nodding my head in agreement.
Yeah, and it's interesting because at the same time that they're removing this stuff, they're giving us 5 times as many buttons to push.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
But that doesn't make the class hard. That just makes it so that it's a lot harder to math out what's the right thing to do at all times. But I mean, making it so that we have a choice between a bunch of options and people who make the right choices do better isn't the only thing that makes a class require skill. I mean, the skill cap of a class is defined by a whole bunch of things. And of course, one of them is the number of buttons you have to push. But another one is your ability to just be aware of the mechanics of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and in the past, I mean, up until fairly recently, movement was always a huge skill with the hunter class. Whether it was stutter stepping to let your auto shots through, or later on it became aspect dancing optimally. And in 5.1, there really won't be a movement-related skill other than standard raid skills.
Right. I mean, that's right. We should have to, like you said, stutter step for the auto shots. I mean, and even back then, in the early part of the game, trapping was a skill that you had to have as a hunter and something to develop. And that's, another thing that we used to be able to do and needed to do that's gone as well. So I could see, you kind of have a good point that they've removed some of the complexity out of the hunter class. But like I said, they have added more buttons in. I don't know. I mean, we had that whole discussion about opium openers, and like you said, there's no cookie cutter way to do it. But I mean, again, when you're getting to that level, you're just sort of talking about optimization at that point, and really getting into the nuance of playing a hunter, and not so much the basic skill of playing a hunter. At that point, you're really getting down into the basics. I mean, the complex stuff of the class.
Mm-hmm.
So, hold on a second. Did we talk about glyphs yet?
Mm-mm. We talked about your mom, but not glyphs.
Did we talk about who I suspect is Frost typing very loudly?
I'm not typing. Roger, you can't prove that, especially if you're not looking at the chat window.
Chat room.
I figured we would probably ask you, do you have any recommendations for specific glyphs that you use on specific encounters? Also, what do you generally use for glyphs when you're just doing a fight that's not an exception?
For glyphs, I usually use deterrence glyph. That's the glyph that I think you mostly rely on sometimes in the fights. On big explosions, you want to reduce as much damage as you can. Then usually you use marked for death just because it's just the easiest option for most of the fights. But then again, you have some fights where you have like 3 hunters and 1 boss. Like for example, I'm gonna say Blade Lord. All right, like you don't really need that glyph, do you? You can hunters mark the boss from the beginning, and you don't actually need it. So. Yeah, I'm using deterrence. I'm using Spirit Bond. Is it called Spirit Bond? I don't know. The one that increases 10% your healing down to you.
Animal Bond. I think it's
Animal
called.
Bond. All right, yeah. Because that's just, just a passive glyph. I don't even know why they put it. It just seems like just flat out benefit. Okay. So those 2, and then usually marked for death or disengage, one of the 2. And I actually used tranquilizing shot 1 on what's called Spirit Kings, because you want to dispel that shield in Heroic, which explodes if you don't. Yeah. So that's about it. I don't like that. Those are the 5 glyphs that I usually play with.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I think to me, Animal Bond seems like the most no-brainer, right? Yeah. Every time you get healed for 10% more. Great, that's always good. And yeah, after our glyph picture is just not what it once was. And maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, it makes it so that's a lot harder to screw up. That's for sure.
Sure.
I wanted to ask though about the glyph of deterrence. Did you want to go over how exactly that helps for people who may not? Because this last time I remembered here, I read it, and the tooltip wasn't as 100% explicit as some people might want.
Okay, so basically, for example, you have fights like, well, I guess not many people have experienced it, but like Grand Empress, Sekzir, what's his name? I don't know, these weird names. On Heroic, on normal as well, I mean, in LFR, it doesn't matter. You have those zones which, when they reach 0 energy, they explode, right? So on Heroic, that explodes for a lot of damage. And you're dropping to like 20% or something like that on your HP. And if you have that deterrence glyph, you can basically reduce 50% of that. Just popping deterrence 1 second before it explodes, and then as soon as it explodes, you can remove it, so you're not really losing anything, and you're just surviving much, much better than anyone else. It's basically having a shield wall whenever you need it. So that's definitely a fight where you can use that.
And to clarify, the glyph is only going to be of an advantage when you're dealing with a mechanic that cannot be absorbed or blocked or whatever. If deterrence, like, because you remember on normal mode, I don't know about heroic, but on normal mode, those cobalt, what are they, cobalt mines or something? On it's one of the abilities of one of the cats or something. They just drop cobalt mines all over the place, and anybody who's so hunters with deterrence could just run right through them and not take any damage.
Yes, right. Yeah, I forgot. Actually, for another example with that is Windlord. When he's doing the Rain of Blades, if you deterrence that, you take 0 damage. So the glyph doesn't actually do anything for you, because the glyph only works if you're taking some damage while in deterrence. So that's usually like some kind of AoE on the ground or some, I don't know. Deterrence, to be honest, is not really clear. It works with half the things. It doesn't work with half the things. You just need to test it. That's it.
Yeah, I think it's in theory it's basically AoEs and dots that go through it, right?
Yeah, but then you have, for example, if I remember, the first boss in Cataclysm, what was its name? The Omnitron system. You had like those green spawns, like the green oozes that spawn, and you could actually go in deterrence and blow them up, and you take no damage. Like, where does that? Sometimes it's really shady what an actual damage is.
The first couple of lockouts for me, anytime I'm doing a new tier of content, I always spend a lot more time in deterrence than I normally do, just trying to, take different types of damage and see what gets absorbed and what gets reduced. And I'm sure my healers get frustrated by this, but it's basically there are a lot of examples of boss abilities that you cannot deterrence through, and that's where the glyph is really handy.
I must admit that they've done a really good job with hunter survivability, which was a big issue in previous tiers. Right now, hunters, you don't really see them die more than other classes. If
much less if they know what
you should
they're
come
doing.
raid with us.
Yes.
Yuri's such a retard. He keeps on running into circles with deterrence up and just dying.
Yeah. Come raid with us. You'll see hunters die left and right, right with everybody else. But the survivability has increased. We've gotten some abilities. The exhilaration talent, is that something you use at all, or just don't find it to be that useful compared to everything? I asked that because
for one reason. I'll say it simple. It's because of Hellstones. There is nothing that a Hellstone can do that your exhilaration will do, and usually you just want that aspect of the Ironhawk. Actually, the only fight where Spirit Bond is better, just FYI, Spirit Bond is better on Will of the Emperor, because in Heroic one, because you take constant damage, and the damage is not high enough for the 15% damage reduction from the aspect of the Ironhawk to cover up the Spirit Bond heal. So that's the only fight where Spirit Bond is better. The rest of the fights just go aspect of the Ironhawk. That's pretty much it. Acceleration, I think, is more of a PvP talent.
Yeah, I agree. I asked that because I've been asked about this from my own raid members, maybe that exhilaration would be better. And I keep trying to explain that it's really not, and that we have our cookies and so forth, and I'm probably going to macro the thing with a cookie anyway, just to And I said I'm with you. I think the 15% damage reduction is just a better return on investment, so to speak, over the long haul than ability with a 2-minute cooldown that only does like 30% health. I don't think it really makes a big difference.
Yeah. Well, I can see certain situations where it can be advantageous, but it depends on. Another thing it depends on is your ability to keep an eye on your pet. Sometimes you want to use exhilaration just to prevent your pet from dying, and there are times, I forget which fight it is, but at one point everybody was mind controlled and my pet was just getting AoE. It's just like, it's just like, you see that guy's pet? Yeah, gone. And I'm like, oh wow, that sucks. All right, the Phoenix ability, he's back. All right, again, Jesus Murphy. What did I use? I used Cower, and then I used Exhilaration. He still died, but I mean, if I were able to pull him out of the fray fast enough and use Cower on the way out and use Exhilaration maybe to keep him alive with a Spirit Man, with a Men pet, maybe that could be. But anyways, aside from weird situational usages, I'm probably going to switch to Ironhawk as well. Mm-hmm. What about the other levels of talents? Do you have any particular interesting bits of advice on the other tiers?
Yeah, I would say actually, just as a general guide, you should just take Binding Shot. Just try it out. I found a lot of uses for it. You can use it, for example, I will say an example. On Sexir, like the last boss in Heart of Fear, those ads, in Heroic at least, they hurt a lot. Okay? So when the tank is pulling them in, you can just drop that and they are stunned for 5 seconds and your tank can just, DPS them without getting one shot. Silencing Shot does not really have many uses. The only place where I actually used it was Windlord, I think. That's about it. Just
and even then,
general,
the melee DPS can always silence better than we can.
Yes. I mean, just Binding Shot, I think, is good to play around with for many fights. Also, Will of the Emperor, we used it a lot on our first heal, together with Death Grip from Death Knights, the Mass Death Grip. It has its uses. You should definitely try it out. I don't think, do you actually even silence shot during the raids nowadays? I don't see any use for it.
No, not really. No. And what about Elegon? Is that another one where Binding Shot would work for the ad?
Yes, definitely. In general, it's just a nice tool, and you should always think of it together with a Death Knight Grip, because that makes it fully effective. And it's one of the bigger stuns out there. 5 seconds AoE stun. You don't really have that, do you? So I think only the Death Knight freeze stun is 5 seconds as well. But
and
that
what about
like
the what did they call it? The Warlock ability? I think Shadow Fury maybe.
Shadow.
There's a Warlock Fury? Ability. Yeah, there's a Warlock ability that they're always comparing to Binding Shot. And they're saying Binding Shot's like a weaker version of that.
Isn't that 3 seconds? Although maybe
I believe it was 3 seconds. It used to be 3 seconds. That was I remember that from way back when.
Okay.
Maybe if you use like a Soul Shard or something, it makes it bigger. I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea.
I think I was hearing about it from a PvP perspective. So from a PvE perspective, Binding Shot actually has some good use. That's something I hadn't even thought about. I was just sitting there with Silencing Shot going, if I ever need silence, I can silence.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really going to impact much. I'm just saying that, the rest are pretty much cookie cutters. I mean, there's not really much to differentiate it from.
And as BM right now, you like Link's Rush, let's say, over a Murder of Crows, and I forget what else is on that too.
Actually, that's an interesting topic. Just real quick, I'll touch on that. Murder of Crows seems, Simcraft's better than Link's Rush, but I just think the problems that come with it, for example, that you pretty much need to use it with Bestial Wrath, because otherwise it's 60 focus. Dear God, where are you gonna get that? And also, you have to think of extra things like, will the boss die from 20% to 0 in faster than a minute or not? Should I save it at like 25%, use it at 20%, or what? It's all of these things, whereas Link's Rush is just, okay, press one button, 0 focus, done. And if it's such a small difference, I think just using Link's Rush better, because it's easier to use, it just covers up that DPS loss. So I don't think Crows is really appealing. The only boss where I actually find it good is Windlord, because you get you don't want to actually, again, it's only for Heroic, I guess. Sorry, I'm just saying what I've been saying. I guess not many of you have done all these fights, so it makes
not the host, but I'm sure our listeners have.
Okay. So basically, the boss gets a 30 second debuff that he gets 600% increased damage taken. So obviously, Murder of Crows being itself 30 seconds duration, you can put it up and then it's like fully effective. It's the best. But yeah, just Link's Rust, Dire Beast, Gleivtos. Baraz is actually nice. You should actually try out Baraz on fights that have 3+ targets, because Gleivtos, for example, you've done the first boss in Heart of Fear. If you're open with Gleivtos, I don't know if you've noticed, but it misses. Like, it does not hit the boss because it's moving. Like, Gleivtos is a bit buggy sometimes with movement of the boss, of the ads. It doesn't always hit properly, whereas Baraz actually does. So you should actually try Baraz on fights which have multiple targets. Like 3+ targets, you should try it out.
Interesting.
I like it as an ability. I think it's kind of fun, but I haven't, like I said, used it in too many of the raid situations. But I've wondered about that, especially where you have big pockets of ads. Certainly on trash, it's fun. Some of those trash pulls. Like
as long as you go forward and shoot backwards, right?
Launch off with barrage. But that would be interesting to see, because there are obviously several fights that do have multiple ads, more than 3 certainly, where being able to hit all of them with one ability is nice. Yeah. I mean, it's just a channeling where you have to be able to stand still for 3 seconds is perhaps the only drawback to it.
Well, you're going to be able to move while doing it, though, after the patch. So.
Oh, that's true. In 5.1, that won't be an issue at all. Correct.
And what about... Nice. Yeah, it is. What about the focus regen tier of talents? Do you have a preference there?
Yeah, I usually, like 90%, 95%, I use Dire Beast. The only fight where I used... what's it called?
Thrill of the Hunt?
No. Thrill of the Hunt, I think it's bad. No offense, but I mean,
Thrill of the Hunt is designed for soloing.
Yeah, it's something for purely, I think, leveling and like 5-man dungeoning and just running through the fight, not being able to cast Cobra shots because you're just moving so fast that Thrill of the Hunt helps you a lot in that regard. But I don't think it's better for any other reason.
Fervor
is actually, I used it on Windlord because you're AoEing so much that it actually helps a lot more than Dire Beast. Because Dire Beast, it seems better. It just does better than Fervor because you actually summon a pet also, which does damage, right? Whereas Fervor doesn't do that. But on a fight where there's massive AoE, you don't really need that because most of your damage is coming from AoE as survival. So that's why I use Fervor on Windlord and also Will of the Emperor again. Like I usually use it only with survival.
I've actually ended up using Thrill of the Hunt a lot, mostly because I'm still getting my feet wet with raiding. But one of the things that I found is that if you're doing AoE, and especially mostly on trash pulls, but especially on any time you're doing AoE, I found Thrill of the Hunt can be a pretty nice increase because it allows you to especially if you've just popped Bestial Wrath, pump out multi-shots basically without stopping.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's horrible, honestly. I don't think it's... On
a single target, I understand, though, because you get all these free arcane shots that you can never do anything with, and it just caps your focus.
Well, what about an encounter like Elagon, where you need to, DPS those orbs? I mean, what do you do for that? Do you just still stick with Dire Beast to make sure you have enough focus to knock those out, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really been an issue for. It's not an issue, let's say, in my guild at least. We just say, okay, we kill this amount of waves, and we just make sure, you just focus on it as much as possible. You save some cooldowns. I don't know. I think the impact of having a worse talent for a small period of a fight does not. It's better to just use something which is better for the 80% of the fight rather than the 20% of the fight.
Good advice.
And the Thrill of the Hunt, what I don't like about it is that you are essentially wasting some procs sometimes. Like if it could, if it could stack up to 5, how it is with Holy Power, how it is with combo points that you can get extra, then maybe yes. But now you're like you get a proc and then again a proc, and you're like, okay, I just wasted 2 procs for nothing.
And also in the AOE situation, just assuming you're in some kind of sustained AoE, right? Your Thrill of the Hunt is going to get you basically a 20 focus discount, I believe, on 3 multi-shots.
Yep.
So you're going to get like a 60 focus at advantage, whereas Fervor is giving you 50 focus at once and another 50 focus over the next 10 seconds.
Yep.
So like in terms of your... And the great thing about Fervor is it's usually up again by the next AoE pack.
Right.
And so I guess I would argue you're actually getting more multi-shots out of Fervor than you are Thrill of the Hunt.
Yeah,
For your
you're probably
average
right.
AoE.
That's
I
good.
just I didn't just randomly say that. I checked on Windlord in normal mode when we're doing the normal mode week, and I used Thrill of the Hunt, and I saw how much focus I saved by using it. And then I thought, in that duration, how many fervors could I have used, and how much focus would that give me? And it was, like 20% more. Plus
there you
the fact that fervor, it's up to you. You can use it whenever you want. Whereas Thrill of the Hunt, you don't really have much power over it. It's just pretty much whenever you want it.
Oh, wait, worst possible time for me. Like right before the boss dies, I'm like, no, I have other things to use this on. Boss is dead.
Yeah, it's always like the kill shot, right?
Yeah, no, free arcane shots, and screw that, I want kill shots.
Yeah, or your Serpent Sting is you're at a point where you need to refresh your Serpent Sting, so you're
Oh.
casting Cobra Shot anyway to
Oh
do that
my
instead of
God.
Arcane Shot. So
How bad is it when you're beast withining, you're nuking, you see Serpent Sting, 3 seconds, you're like, I can do one more arcane shot and still make it to refresh it, and you just miss it for like 0.1 seconds. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just let it fall off, and I use Bestial Wrath to reduce the focus cost of reapplying
I
it
know.
with another Serpent Sting.
mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
usually I'm not that coordinated. So we've only got a few minutes left. Did we have any Q&A that we wanted to let the listeners ask Roger Brown?
Yes. Ollie Sonder has a question for Roger Brown. And Ollie Sonder asks, cabbage, carrots, squash, or pink turnips all the way?
I would say definitely pink turnips all the way.
What? What? I don't get it.
Before the call, Roger was telling us that he's a big farmer.
Oh, that's fun.
And so pink turnips, I'm assuming just for the banquet? Or wait. What are pink turnips
Just because
used
they're
for?
pink, I think.
Awesome. I was going to say songbell seeds are my farming implement of choice, or not implement. my
I
farming yield of choice.
recently ditched Songbell because I can actually make more money selling food than I can crafting the jewel crafting pets.
Oh yeah, those jewel crafting. Yeah, that's not worth it.
yeah,
There's
those
a
pets have gone down. You said they started out good in the beginning, and then
God, for a while those things were selling for like 2,500, man. Those were
Mhm.
good days.
If you make a lot of food, heck, even if you don't make a lot of food, and I know this is way out of place, but yeah, you know what? It's way out of place. We'll talk about it after the show.
All right, so next question. Actus says that he thinks that Euripides was knocked up by a Worgen feral druid.
What?
And his question is, what do you guys think of Truefire and Arkham going back and forth on the MMO Champion forums about BM rotations? I do not read the MMO Champion forums. Does anybody know what this is talking about?
Yes, and this is a topic we sort of covered in the beginning. So Arctim, and these are both guys with progression rating guilds. I think Truefire's with Blood Legion, and Arctim's with Pie Chart, I think is the name of their guild. At any rate, the Arctim did a video on BM opening rotation, what he was doing for his opener, and then this was posted on the MMO Champion forums, and Truefire chimed in and said, no, and sort of gave his opinion about what he's doing with his opener, and they've been going back and forth about what the proper opener for the Beast Mastery rotation should be.
I'm sure it's been a very cordial and polite conversation with nothing but the best.
I've been reading it because it hasn't been too bad, but I will say this: if you've only
It
watched,
is the MMO Champion forums.
yes, and the video was posted at the WoW Hunters Hall as well. So if you've only watched this video, you should know that I believe Arctim has even changed up his rotation, what he's doing slightly from what he had put in the video. So that video he did was a little bit out of date. But I think it goes back to what you were saying, Roger, that there's no, I guess, true answer. There's no cookie cutter, thing to follow, and I guess everyone's still trying to figure out how to get the most DPS within that opening pre-pop window, essentially.
Yeah, I'm actually I am in contact with TrueFire.
Are you? Okay.
That you mentioned it. Yeah, and like I ask, other hunters, what do you do on your opener? What do you do? Like, let's see, what's the difference that we are between our openers, and maybe we can agree that something is better, so that we don't feel clueless when doing stuff. And yeah, I don't like that at all. But I don't think the only thing actually that I think would solve these issues is just removing readiness from the hunter abilities. that would solve these opener issues.
Well, it seems like the one thing that you guys are all doing, though, is at least with one of those bestial wraths, is using readiness to get a third kill command in there. So I think you all agree on doing that and fitting both your bestial wraths within that potion window, so getting the full duration of your potion with both bestial wraths. So at a minimum, I think you all are at least attempting to do that, and then it's kind of what you do in between where there's this debate.
Yeah,
this is one of those things where it may be a very minor point, but there probably is a right answer that we could probably figure out if we put our heads together. So that might be something worth thinking about offline.
You probably would really need, for something like this, you'd really need to sim it.
Yeah, but sims don't tell the whole story sometimes, and it depends on the quality of the sim. But I mean, you could use the sim as a tool to, just bearing in mind. No, but you're right. If we put together, a special sim that really only focused on the first whatever portion of time, making certain assumptions, and we could probably put together in a, assuming those assumptions, this kind of thing. But
well, except here's what I bet you would happen. I bet you what you would find out is somebody would be like, this rotation does the most DPS in the first 30 seconds. And somebody else would be like, yeah, but this does the most DPS in the first 20 seconds.
And then somebody else would say, yeah, but this one does the most DPS if you have bad luck on trinket procs, and this one does the most DPS.
Does the most DPS within your proc. So I have a feeling that even then it wouldn't be really clear. And even if you try to say, well, what does the most DPS for the fight? It's like, well, if the fight's 4.5 minutes, because that already happens,
it
certainly
does, yeah.
in Cataclysm, where people were like, ooh, and this is the right way to do this stuff. It's like, yeah, but you shift the duration of the fight by 20 seconds and suddenly something else is the right way, which to me just says that the differences between them aren't super meaningful.
Yep.
So can I also say one thing? Apart from all of this, you can also put in the equation that they're just changing stuff. For example, they're changing rapid fire. They're going to make it a haste and not a ranged. They're going to change it so that your pet actually gets benefit from it. From what I saw, so
right, so you're going to get attack speed benefit.
Yes, so you might want to couple that with a Beast Within, and oh wait, you have the tier bonus now. So that's 6 seconds plus on your Beast Within. Oh, you need to change. I don't know. And keep in mind that you kind of want to have one opener. You don't want to be like, okay, changing this every single fight, because honestly, if you just have one opener in your mind, it may vary a bit, but just one opener, it's much easier to pull it off perfectly every time. Whereas if changing something every try, you're just like, you miss one button and then you're like smashing your keys randomly. Oh, what am I doing? It happens.
Now I'm lost.
Yeah, I was going to say it's easy to write it down on paper and say, here's your time intervals. But even just going to a training dummy, and because I spent some time doing this, trying to and it's very, very tight, and there's like no room for error. You either have to, and you have to understand what you're doing on a conceptual basis. You just can't memorize a sequence, or else you'll get it wrong half the time.
And part of it is my trinket up? If so, do this. If not, do that. So,
and I think an important thing to stress is that for 80-85% of the raiding population, the important thing is that it is far more important to not stand in the fire.
That's a good idea.
Yes.
That's a lot. But
85% of the population that doesn't know that is not listening to our shows.
No, they know it, but they still stand in the fire.
Yeah.
I guess my argument is you're better off maybe being a tad sloppy on your opener and having your eyes on the AoE and not on your buttons.
Well, have you seen the video Kryptarian made recently of Scumbag DPS. Or not?
No, but
No.
that sounds like I should go and watch.
He says some tips like, "Oh, you need to move out of the fire." Just say something like, "Oh, guys, I'm lagging. Please heal me." And you just stand there and DPS.
I like him. That's it. You have been listening to episode 151 of the Hunting Party Podcast. This is Euripides from OutDPS, WoW Insider, and the Call to Auction Podcast.
And I'm Dark Brew from thebrewhall.com and the Brewhall on Twitter.
And this is Frostheim from Warcraft Hunters Union, WoW Insider, and Frostheim WHU on Twitter.
Ali is probably on mute again, but that's Ali Sonder from the Hunting Party Podcast. We are on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, and if you don't use any of that, we have RSS on the show notes.
And if you like us, please don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes, especially one where you mention how uncommonly good-looking Frostheim is.
If you want to try naming this show, you can email us at thehuntingpartypodcast@gmail.com. Sorry, at huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com, and we'll get your name professionally mangled on air.
All right, stay thirsty, my friends. And remember to drink your Dark Brew Lager.
Don't forget to spare and neuter. Don't forget to spare and neuter your failed druid.
Grr.
And don't forget to pay your dues.
Viper to cheetah to dragon hawk. No time to waste, 'cause I can jump shot. BM, MM, and SV. I can rock out any tree. Never worried about my threat, 'cause I've got FD and misdirect. Catching loose mobs in my traps. I never miss, 'cause I am hip capped. 'Cause I'm the hunter, not the marked. I'm the fighter, not the spark. I'm the kiter, not the kite. I'll top the meters every fight. Rated in cave dealing death. Just me, my gun, and my trusty bed. Now let's begin with Illidan, Osirian, and Gil'jadan, Magdamar, Asgalor, Gruul, Cthulhu, and Razorgore, Onyxia to Ragnaros. Which one have we killed the most? Kel'Thuzad to Malygos. We even killed the Kama's ghost. Feels like we're getting close, all that running as a ghost. Anubarak, Yogg-Saron, Thorian, Sartharian, Magtheridon, Saphiron, Lucifer to Sulfuron, Archimon, Amalon, Coromon, and Algalon. The faction champions, the death toll rolling on and on. Garvale, Executus, Chromagus, Jarexus, Mon, Urukilthus. We won't